Chronicle of the Lost Bomber. This story took place in 1998 in the northern reaches of Russia, in the Arkhangelsk region. Search teams managed to examine the wreckage of a fallen plane and finally unravel the mystery of its demise. Far from human settlements and roads, two hunters stumbled upon the remains of a crashed military aircraft, along with the skeletal remains of its pilots. The area was marshy and nearly impassable, so preparing for the perilous expedition to investigate the bomber took several years. In the autumn of 1998, a group of enthusiasts ventured deep into the taiga in search of the bomber. The journey was long and arduous. They had to traverse dense forests, swamps, and mountain rivers. Here is an account from one of the expedition members. Our crossings over minor water obstacles were otherwise less dramatic. Even the monotonous drizzle couldn't overshadow the anticipation of unveiling the taiga's secret. We knew the plane we had discovered was untouched, with its crew and documents intact. The closer we got to our goal, the more our spirits lifted. Emerging onto yet another swamp, we noticed the guide signaling with his hand. To the left. Advancing another 200 meters, we delved deeper into the taiga, where two century-old spruces concealed a winding, deep canyon carved by the Chukcha Forest River. On its bank, something white glinting through the green. 50 more steps. And there it was, the tail of the fallen giant, its extinguished stars encircled in black trim. We had arrived. I remember a peculiar click in my mind. The trim. That was pre-war. It has been abolished after the Highland Gaul confusion regarding insignia. This referred to the armed conflict between Soviet-Mongolian forces and the Japanese army, which raged from spring to autumn 1939 along the Halkin-Gol River. Remarkably preserved, the Shkas aircraft machine gun lay in the fractured fuselage, split cleanly along its technological seams. Examining the wreckage and crash site allowed us to piece together the tragedy's broad strokes, and subsequent investigations unveiled the full story in vivid detail. On December 17, 1939, at approximately 9 a.m. to 9:05 a.m., just as dawn broke, a bomber commanded by Senior Lieutenant Georgy Vasilievich Karalkin of the 80th Bomber Aviation Regiment hastily took off from the island airfield Yagodnik, located 17 kilometers from Arkhangelsk along the northern Dwina River. The urgency was dictated by the Army's offensive that began the same day. Bomber strength was crucial for dismantling Finnish fortifications. The Soviet Finnish, or Winter War, had hit its first roadblocks, and the bombers were tasked with obliterating the fortified pillboxes. The weather that day was atrocious. 100% low cloud cover. Gusty winds at 10 to 12 meters per second. Air temperatures hovering between 0 and -2 degrees Celsius. A snow cover of 10 to 15 centimeters, and by evening, the predicted snowfall had begun. Miserable conditions, fraught with the perils of low-altitude flight and ice formation in the humid air. The bomber, carrying 4 crew members, set its course westward, bound for the war front in Ukhta. At 9:22 on onboard time, the plane crashed into the forest. Today, it is difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of the crash. Most likely, it was the usual interplay of circumstances culminating in a fatal outcome. Adverse weather conditions, pilot error, icing, perhaps technical malfunctions. The undeniable fact remains: the SB-2 bomber with its engines running at nominal power, struck the treetops on the high bank of the Taiga River and was shredded by the trunks upon impact, as if it were made of paper, ripped to the shreds. The wreckage was scattered over an area no larger than 30 by 20 meters. There was no telltale impact crater. Everything remained on the surface, soaked in a gasoline and oil. Miraculously, the shattered aircraft did not burst into flames. The bomber, manufactured at factory number 22 in Kazan in August 1939, never made it to war. In the 2 days following the disappearance of the crew, a squadron of TB-3 bombers from the same 80th Bomber Aviation Regiment conducted 25 search flights. Yet, no trace of Karalkin's plane was found. At first glance, the crash site offered little information. It was evident that everyone on board had perished here. However, a meticulous examination of the site allowed investigators to begin piecing together the details of the catastrophe and reconstructing its sequence of events. Pilot Karalkin's body, upon impact, crushed the control yoke, his lifeless form hurtling through the twisted metal of the aircraft like a helpless pawn in a grinder of steel. The radio gunner's parachute lay in the fractured fuselage alongside its owner. His skeletal remains were buried under a thin layer of leaves and needles, their auburn hues contrasting sharply with the splintered bones. Judging by the halved ribs, compressed cervical vertebrae, fractured skull, and other severe injuries, it was clear that Senior Sergeant Yan Grigorievich Komarichev, the radio gunner, had been gravely, fatally injured. Moreover, upon impact, the full weight of the bomber's tail section crashed into the radio gunner, as well as squadron technician who was seated in the rearmost part of the plane. Wrecks and remnants were unfolded and hung to dry on the wreckage of the fuselage. By summer, the fabric has regained its integrity and had become worthy of display as museum artifact. The stars on the fuselage and wings, shielded from the sun, had been so well preserved they appeared freshly painted, as if applied just the day before. Inside a shattered, white, plywood medical box from the onboard first aid kit, a pair of medical packets remained untouched. Despite being exposed to the elements for the case, they looked surprisingly fresh and vibrant. Near the main pile of wreckage lay a metallic three-bladed propeller, twisted into ram's horns, a testament to its proper function at the moment of impact. The thin green-brown moss covering the metal formed uneven patches, giving the impression that little time had passed since the tragedy. Around the site were skeletal remains of trees and rotting trunks, felled by the aircraft's charge. A survey of the area revealed that the plane had narrowly failed to clear a small taiga ridge. The forest it clipped was simply too high. Beyond the ridge, the flight path opened onto a swamp. Most likely, the pilot had no options left. Everything unfolded within seconds. The heavy bomber smashed into the forest like a colossal projectile. The bomber's clock had recorded the exact time of the crash, down to the minute. Scattered within the wreckage was an abundance of military attire, from blue tunics to fur-lined leather jackets. Pilots, much like tank crews, tend to haul an assortment of gear with them on board. An aviation technician's tablet case was found among the debris. Inside was a notebook containing a mix of notes, the names of squadron's pilots and technicians, technical observations about the SB bomber, and general notes on aviation mechanics. Most importantly, The tablet held the ID of their unit, the 80th Bomber Aviation Regiment, based at the Kegostrov and Yagodnik airfields near Arkhangelsk. The dispersion of airfields was unsurprising. By 1941, the Arkhangelsk Air Hub included 6 fully operational airfields with earthen and wooden runways. Aside from these documents, there were other loose sheets with scribbled notes, though they offered no concrete leads or additional context. The fragile paper, even when soaked and layered with roots, had to be carefully separated underwater with delicate movements. Otherwise, there was no way to work with it. At times, despair overwhelmed me. I would abandon this paper surgery and only return once I had calmed down. Progress came slowly, interrupted by bouts of frustration. The decayed, moldering paper often disintegrated into beautiful fragments, irretrievably destroying the information locked in its pencil scribbles. The effort was monumental. It turned out that no records of the missing crew existed in the regiment's archives. The traces were discovered purely by chance in the regiment's historical log, a document meant to chronicle the unit's journey, not to catalog losses. Someone had penciled in a marginal note: the 17th of December 1939. Missing, killed, crew of Karelkin. Squadron Commander Senior Lieutenant Georgy Vasilievich Karelkin, Squadron Navigator Senior Lieutenant Alexander Nikolaevich Safonov, Radio Gunner Junior Platoon Commander Yan Grigorievich Komaryshev, Squadron Technician Senior Lieutenant Sergei Ivanovich Kirishenkov. Karelkin and Safonov were found 8 to 10 meters from the plane, thrown clear when the aircraft struck the trees. These were not skeletons, but collections of shattered bones. Sergei Kirishenkov was located to the right of this fuselage. When the moss and decaying leaves covering his remains were removed, it became clear that the squadron technician had survived the crash. Near Kirishenkov's remains were 2 opened cans of meat rations and 2 unwrapped bandages from individual medical kits. The man had survived the bomber's crash into the forest. Perhaps the impact was softened by his position in the SB's tail section, where passengers were typically seated. His body had collided with the radio gunner, which may have mitigated the force. In any case, Kirishenkov suffered only a broken collarbone and leg, injuries not immediately fatal. For a while, Sergei crawled among the wreckage, drenched in fuel and oil, bandaging himself, eating and waiting for rescue. The weather, by winter standards, was bearable, with a gentle evening snow covering the crash site. How long Kirishenkov survived remains unknown. We found his remains lying on his back, arms outstretched in a cross-like pose, dressed in technician's jacket with zippers. On his wrist were silver watches, a symbol of the belief that a watch stops at the moment of its owner's death. No one will ever recount the final moments of this doomed man, lying injured in the wilderness, devoid of any hope for salvation. A total of 24 search flights were conducted to locate the lost bomber, but none succeeded. Of the crew's families, only Safonov's relatives could not be traced. A native of Uglич in Yaroslavl, his appearance and fate remain a mystery to this day. The bomber's crew was finally laid to rest in June 2000 at the Vologda Cemetery in Arkhangelsk. Thank you for watching, friends. You can support our channel by sending a super thanks of any amount or signing up for sponsorship. Wishing you all the best.